Ooh, the meeting is being live streamed. That's okay by me. Mr. Zoom host, can you hear me?
Yes, I want to introduce Dr. David Kemp, who is founder and principal of the Dialogue Company. And he has developed some wonderful resources, including the White Ally Toolkit and other things, helping people talk to other people when there's issues of disagreement. And today, David will be teaching us about deep canvassing. Thank you very much, David.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ricky, for being the tech host. I would recommend as a backup, you turn on the Zoom recording, although like I trust the people at Google a lot, but I would suggest you turn it as a backup. I turn on the recording from Zoom. So as Ricky said, thank you so much. This, there you go. My name is Dr. David Camp. I'm with a company called the Dialogue Company. And I spent a lot of time thinking about how people can better communicate so they can achieve more collaboration. And so, what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be exploring a method that I sort of created, but also is a reflection of best practices in the fields of dialogue and persuasion, and that is designed to maximize people's sense of connectivity and persuasive influence when there is a disagreement. So that's our purpose, and we're so happy that we have some people who just heard about this us randomly. We won't even know them. That's fantastic, as well as people who are friends of those behind this show. So I'll just say a little bit about this show. Life, Light, and Curious. The purpose of this whole endeavor is to provide a needed mechanism where people can reflect on and maybe even practice better techniques for conversation. We all know that the nature of life is that we have conflict. The nature of life is that there's difficult conversations. Although it seems like recently, given the divisiveness in society, some of which is purposely created by outside forces, that it's even more important that we learn how to talk to each other in better ways. And the good news is that there's a certain level of scientific consensus around better ways of talking, to even just to create more connectivity. And as I said before, to enhance our persuasive power. And the purpose of this forum, which we plan to make on a regular basis, and a place where people who are concerned about divisiveness can come, people who are concerned about the conversations they have can come, people who are specialists in things like nonviolent communication can come. Um, the vision is I might not be the host all the time. We might make this available to be hosted by other people who have a passion for helping people communicate better. So we're trying to deal with life, and we're trying to keep conversations sufficiently light and filled with curiosity. But also, the reason that it's life, light, and curious is because we hope that these better conversations can produce more light and less heat in our interactions with other people. So that's the big picture of that. So today, we're going to be, I mean, we're glad everybody's here, and there'll be times for questions and answers. Much of the conversation will focus on two people. Rafi, what is your, I don't even know your, Rafi Rieger, how is that, is it
Yes,
Rieger or Rieger?
Rieger is exactly right. Rieger.
Okay, great. He's a computer scientist, a concert violinist, a concert master, and all around very smart guy. So we appreciate that. And Theo Brown, who his, how long have you been doing dialogue work, Theo?
Very long time. I don't know,
Okay.
40 years.
That
Probably.
long, huh?
40, just 40. So he knows a lot about how people can talk to each other, and will bring to bear. He also is has a lot of experience in doing these kind of workshops, and he'll be playing a role to help us practice some of these methods. So So we welcome everybody else who's joined. Hopefully other people will too. And we'll have a chance to hear from everybody before it's all over. So what I'd like to start out with is a brief explanation of what I call the reach method of engaging in conversation, which is designed to both maximize the connectivity in a conversation with a disagreement about a difference of opinion, and also increase your persuasive power. We are very fortunate that the way that you produce the maximum connection with somebody is also the way to maximize your chance of persuading them. That just happens to turn out to be true. So that's a good thing. So let me see if I can pull this up effectively now. Let's see. Y'all can see that, huh?
Yes.
All right, let's see if we can make that thing go full screen. All right. So let me move this out the way. So again, it's called the reach method. I love acronyms, and I will explain what this acronym means. It means it's a staged process. We're suggesting there's a conversational arc that tends to be most effective. And so the first step is reflect. I'll explain what that means. Second step is inquire, British spelling. It has to do with manifesting your curiosity by asking questions. The third is agree, find a connection with the other person. And you do all that before you challenge them. We try to invite them to new thinking. And then if you can try to harmonize the differences of opinion. That's the flow. I will explain each of those steps now. Okay. As I will discuss, reflect has to do with relaxing and rekindling your empathy. Inquire has to do with eliciting a story from them and empathizing with them. Agree means show alignment and acceptance. Challenges more trying to coax them to new thinking, and then honor their point of view, honor different points of view. So let me tell you what this is based on. I'll go through a little bit of neuroscience. One of the things that scientists have discovered is there's something called the backfire effect. When there's difference of opinion that exist, often what we do is we try to marshal our facts in order to move their opinion, no matter what the topic is. And what scientists have found that usually when the difference of opinion comes up, there's a part of our brain that gets activated. We feel like we're under threat to a certain extent. And when we marshal facts, what typically happens is that people double down on their beliefs. And this has been shown multiple times, like even putting people in MRI machines and doing brain scans of them and showing them information that shows, for example, their favorite political candidate saying something contradictory. And what happens is the same part of our brains that get light up when we're under physical threat get lit up when we're under ideological threat. And so it's not surprisingly, people often double down on their beliefs. So using facts as a general matter doesn't work that well when you're trying to persuade people to reconsider their opinion. Another finding in that realm, scientists have, there's been multiple studies that show only about 23% of people are responsive to facts to change their opinion. And this is left and right. About more than 3/4 of people, we're not very responsive to facts. We present with facts and we don't change our beliefs. So that's a reality we have to deal with. Obviously, there needs to be facts in our collective political discourse, public discourse, but as a general matter, people are not moved by facts. There's something in our brain called mirror neurons. We've all seen it activated. You've probably been in settings where somebody starts to laugh and other people laugh and they don't know really what's funny, or it starts to cry or starts to yawn. What that is about is a part of our brain evolved over millennia where there's a part of us, if we are talking to somebody, interacting with somebody, and we identify with them, then part of our brain wants to do what part of their brain we think is doing. And so there's a mirror neuron circuitry that gets set up. And what you want to do is to use this to your advantage in your communication. The most famous scholar of influence is a guy named Robert Cialdini, and he talks about one important aspect of influence is the notion of reciprocity. So as an example, we all have gotten Christmas, we all have gotten holiday cards from people not on our list. And then we got to decide, am I going to send this person a holiday card? Like and the reason we do that is because mammals and even non-mammals know that it's in our evolutionary interest when somebody does something nice to us is to try to do something nice back to them of a reasonably similar magnitude. So that's the principle of reciprocity. And finally, any preacher or lawyer or salesperson will tell you about the power of storytelling. Stories work better than facts. Some people say human beings are story processors, not logic processors. So what we want to do in crafting a communication strategy, which we're trying to maximize influence, is to not fire up the backfire effect, to get our mirror neuron circuitry going, to use the principle of reciprocity, and to do that through stories. And so the method that I'm teaching you about, the REACH method, tries to enact all of those. So remember, it was, the slide's out of place. It was reflect, inquire, agree, challenge, harmonize. So what does reflect mean? Well, the first thing to do, when you know that a conversation has difference of opinion in it, and you're likely to deal with that, you want to relax. You want to calm yourself down. You want to do whatever self-regulation strategies you found. Now, I have found in doing this workshop hundreds of times around the country that often people have self-regulatory strategies, meditation, deep breathing, etc., but they somehow don't use them when they know they're about to have a conversation with difference of opinion. So you're going to your relatives and you know they have difference of opinion and you're nervous about Thanksgiving, but people do not use those strategies that they use in other ways. So part of what's important to do on the verge of or even in the middle of a conversation with disagreements that are meaningful to you is to do things to try to purposely relax. So for example, just a couple of quick ones. Sometimes some people in our workshops have suggested that they imagine themselves in a relaxing spot and then imagine one and then imagine themselves there, or do progressive body relaxation. And you can do that if you're about to have a conflicted conversation, you excuse yourself, go to the bathroom and do some of that. Deep breathing, self-massage. There's a variety of strategies. But the point is that one way to take the heat out of conversation is to do some self-regulation so that you are making strategic and good choices and not just reacting. In that same vein, it's useful to rekindle your compassion. So there's something that you could call them compassion boosters, things you can do to gin up your compassion for the other person. That's going to be helpful in making the conversation less conflictual. So, for example, sometimes when I am on the midst of on the verge of a difficult conversation, I might stop and conceive of the person I'm talking to as a vulnerable child, or remind myself of qualities I like about them, or think back to a time when I want to be listened to. There's various strategies. So the point here is that we want to relax ourselves and, if possible, rekindle our compassion for the other person. So that's the reflect step. Inquire, British spelling. We want to shift the conversation to where we first ask for their point of view, and not only to hear more about their point of view, but to ask about experiences that drive their point of view. So the point here is that you want to first show some interest in them by asking questions as opposed to just start to spout your point of view. Once you recognize that there's disagreement, you want to ask the question and want to have them not only say more about their point of view, but most important, to go beneath their opinion to the experiences that drive their opinion, because experience-based conversations are more connecting than opinion-based conversations. So that's why you want to shift when there's disagreement, you want to shift the ground of the conversation away from opinion and towards experience, because sharing experiences is a more connecting thing to do. Okay, so in this, you want to elicit their perspective and you want to try to empathize with it, right? If you get them to tell you a story, again, you have mirror neurons too. So it's useful for you to fire up your mirror neurons by getting them to tell you a story about something that happened to them that's related to their point of view in their mind. We want to try to be curious and not judgmental. And having people, it's easy to be judgmental about people's opinion. It is less easy to be judgmental about their experience. So you want to create the conditions where you're being less judgmental by asking about their experiences. So it's also useful to do things to help you listen better. So these are just some examples. Deep breaths. Some people have said, I want to look directly in their eyes. Some people said, I don't want to do that. I want to look at their lips and not look at their eyes. You got to find your own things to do to both relax and gin up your empathy and listening muscle. So I want to just stop for a second and ask anybody on the call, have they discovered any tips that they could use to either relax or gin up their empathy that they found to be effective?
Well, I have an interesting technique that I found just recently because there are ongoing conversations about the war in Gaza, and so we're having these community meetings, and I found I was able to keep my cool better than others, and what helped that was in advance telling myself, I can imagine stuff I'm going to hear, and just being prepared to hear that and contend with it and let it just roll over me and then engage it in some other fashion from the side rather than head on, allowed me to actually just keep my cool, whereas others were getting agitated and counterproductively. It was counterproductive to get agitated. It was more productive to let it waft over me and then engage it in some other fashion.
So think about,
but just thinking about it in advance, playing in advance that this is what's going to happen, enabled me to do that.
Right. You're less shocked. I can't believe these fools are saying that, because you've already thought about the fact that people are going to be saying stuff that you disagree with.
Completely expected, and I want to move from there on, not be shocked that they're saying what they're saying.
I got you. Anybody else have any things that they've done that are in the same spirit we're talking about, to calm yourself down and or to gin up your compassion for other people?
I had like a meeting recently, very heated meeting. I think Eric knows about it. It was like 3 against 1 at a workplace. And it's very complex between union management and even like between union and union members. And I had like even a union member in the meeting. And so like what I found was just like completely throwing myself, like I started the whole like who's right, who's wrong kind of thing, and like back and forth bouncing, and it just wasn't working. The arguments were just getting double down. And then it hit me. I was like, oh, I just need to focus on them for now. Like they can't hear me. And it to an extent it worked. But I think just like almost validating that they're right, their view is right, was definitely helping. Like I was just listening and kind of saying, okay, yeah, you're right. Like and then I could see the shift in the conversation when that was happening. But I was definitely worked up. It's just I didn't have the opportunity to leave or like soothe myself. And so it was a tough one, but something about just seeing their perspective and like validating them in the moment really helped me get through it. There's a worry about the fonding part, like where like I'm just appeasing them, but it's like if they feel like I'm seeing their point of view, that it's more likely that they'll see mine. And yeah.
Yep.
Sorry about Raphael. I had my voice unmuted for a second there.
I shouldn't have interrupted. But just along what you're saying, supporting what you're saying, the objective is to drop the armor on all sides. And certain things we can do can make the armor pop up very strongly, and other things we do can actually drop the armor. Actually letting people voice their most extreme opinions and get it out of their system automatically drops some armor on their side. Being prepared to listen, empathize to the extent that one can, but just allowing the sides to really get their deepest feelings on the table. And as David was saying, including the experiences that drive them, but that may take a little prodding, but all so that one avoids the defensive reaction and and sort of drops the armor and allows the different parties to feel listened to, and then obviously we move on to shared humanity. And David is going to get there, but seeing what we can agree on.
That's right. Some specialists say that it's useful to say, in this phase, is there anything else you want to tell me? Like to ask that a couple times so that they
Get it all out. Yeah.
I really want to hear from you. Is there anything else I should know? Anything else I should know about your opinion? Right. So that they feel truly heard. Yep. Okay. So anyway, yes, part of what we're talking about is you calm yourself down, you try to gin up your compassion a little bit. And I'll just say one thing I would just say, Zoran, like sometimes moments happen quickly, you have to respond, but you can always go to the bathroom. Right? Most people will say, if you say, I really want to finish this, I got to go to the bathroom. And some of our clients have used that trip to the bathroom to do something to calm themselves down. So that's an option for you. All right. So let's move forward. So Rafi was just referring to some of this, and so is Zoran. And the next step is agree. And what agree means is you want to try to show that there's some level of alignment or that you have with them, and you have some level of acceptance of their point of view, even if you overall disagree with their opinion. What you want to do is to show some level of agreement. So what you've done in the elicit step is to ask them for an experience that's related to their point of view. And here you do something like show that you agree, you have acceptance of their opinion, acceptance of their experience. You accept that they had an experience. They might lead to a conclusion you don't agree with, but you accept that they had experience and there's some connection that you at least can understand why they made it, even if you don't have the same opinion. And you try to look for some alignment with them. And the best way to do that is to look for alignment at the level of some similar experience, perhaps an experience that shows you have similar values. You have an experience that you have similar emotions, or you have similar goals. But the point is to move. You've shifted their conversation to experience, and now you want to have experience-based conversation because, as I said, experiences tend to fire up our mirror neurons much more than some recitation of facts or some generalities. We're story processors, and so when we hear a story that somebody we even reasonably identify with, it produces more empathy in the exchange. And so that's why you want to find some kind of way to appreciate, to express agreement with something in what they said, even if it's not their conclusion, in order to get them nodding their head that they empathize with you too. And one of the things one reason you're doing that is because if you can set yourself up as this person doesn't think I'm crazy, and they aren't crazy either. I can identify with them, they can identify with me. Then when you come later with an experience that pushes in a different direction, they're more likely to try to empathize with it as opposed to just see it as foreign and something wrong that they have to disagree with. Again, what you've done, hopefully, you've gotten clear on their why, and you're talking about you're listening to their experience and maybe even paraphrasing back, so you can, in fact, tell an experience that they will find resonant with them to some extent. And then next, after all of that, then you can think about challenging them. Then it's useful to challenge them. And you challenge them by, again, explaining your point of view by calling upon a personal experience that led you to boost your support for your point of view. So it's not about giving the strongest data and facts about your opinion. This method is about saying, let me tell you an experience I had that led to my point of view or bolsters my point of view. So you're doing it through a personal story. And in that, you're challenging / inviting them to reconsider their way, how they're looking at it, because at this point, hopefully, they've generated some empathy towards you, and they know you don't think they're crazy. That's what the agree step was about. And maybe they don't think you're crazy, right? So that's the challenge step. And then lastly, the kind of optional step this is great when it happens, is to harmonize, right? And try to put a bow around the conversation and say, maybe it's possible for two seemingly opposing things to both being reasonably have some aspect of truth to them. So you can say that, or if a lot of trust has been built, you might ask if they've had an experience, even an unusual one, that leads to the opposite of their original conclusion, right? So this is an attempt to say, we both are onto something here. We perhaps both have had experiences that lead to different points of view. I've come down on one side of what's generally true. You may come on another, but there's evidence on each side that needs to be considered if we're going to be reasonable. So, so that's the method. Any comments, questions before I try to demonstrate it?
Regarding that last step, may I comment?
Sure.
I think it's productive once you've gotten to this stage and you have some level of trust to think about, so what is the way forward? Because we are not going to resolve all our disagreements. So there are unknowns, and about those unknowns, we may skew in different directions, and we may continue to do so. But it could be that we have enough agreement that there's some way forward pragmatically. And other questions may be resolved down the line. But meanwhile, what can we agree on enough in order to make progress? And I think that's the kind of bow you would love to be able to put on the conversation.
Yep, that's right. Felicia or Priti, you have any questions or comments about all that?
I have. Oh, go ahead, Felicia. Go.
Not as yet, but thank you.
I wanted to share about the paraphrasing. I also did some communication studies. I've done it for about 7 years. And one of the things I learned is to recreate when someone says something, just to show them that you totally comprehended exactly what they're saying. You kind of, you say it back, but not in a way that they might think you're mocking them, or you have to be careful about how you do that too. Right. Because you have to be very, yeah, I really get your experience. Yeah, speaking in the way that you completely communicate that you get the experience. So that I think that's a very powerful thing. The moment you're recreated, I think it diffuses so much of the emotion that's on either side, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's right. The paraphrasing can let the person know that they have been seen and heard, and that's really important for doing what Ravi said earlier about letting the armor down. Okay. So what I'd like to do next is a little demonstration of this, and Theo has volunteered to help out on that demonstration. And so here's the context of this. Is there a way, Ricky, to have both Theo and I highlighted or centered? Because despite what I sometimes think, it's not all about me.
I'm glad to hear you admit that, David.
Great. Thanks, Ricky. Okay. So the context of this is that this conversation we're going to have is about gun rights, gun control. And I tend to be a gun control advocate. And Theo has a difference of opinion, and we're going to discover that, and then I'm going to try to manage the conversation using the Reese method I described earlier. So Theo, I'm going to start out in a minute by asking you, what's been on your mind, and you're going to express to me your opinion on gun control, and then we'll pursue that. Okay, so let's go. So hey, Theo, how you doing?
Good to see you, David.
What's been on your mind recently?
Oh, politics is everywhere. I hear about it all the time, and a lot of it's discouraging. I don't know. I've been concerned about, sort of some of the loose, and it seems to me sort of simplistic talk about gun violence. In DC area where I live, the gun violence is way up, and there's a lot of talk about needing to ban guns more, and that bothers me, as you probably know from previous conversations. I'm a strong believer in the Second Amendment. Seems to me like the law is really clear, and that the kind of things people talk about trying to do with guns wouldn't solve the problem anyway. So that's been on my mind. I've been concerned about that.
Wow, that's interesting. I don't we've not really talked this before. I think I might. It's interesting. I have to sort of my opinion about it. But let me ask this question. Tell me some experience you had either long ago or recently that sort of reinforced your view on this.
Yeah, well, I don't own a gun, but I have been around a lot of people who do, and had certainly had some experiences where I saw how important guns are to people, the role they play. I guess my first experience with it, I remember when I was a kid, we used to visit my relatives in Texas, and I had my uncles all had guns, and they'd take us out shooting and all. But I remember in particular a time, two times come to mind when you say that, where there'd been some violence in this little area. There'd been a murder and some real terrible violence in this sort of rural area. And I remember I was relatively young and my uncle talking about it, and we were all sort of frightened that here we were in this, and he assured us that he had a gun, and he would protect us if there was any problem like he had heard about. And I was young, but it made a lot of impression on me, and I remember feeling secure in that sense that was the case. And then again, I remember a time, as you asked that, years later when I was a graduate student in New York, I was in the 70s in New York City, and as a graduate.
Oh Lord.
Yeah,
Oh,
way
really?
back, man. It was wild and woolly in New York in the 70s. And I was doing intern work around the city at the time and doing some stuff I lived up near Columbia and in Morningside Heights and I was doing some work in East Harlem at the time at a church there. And I was in through and all around that area a lot. And the big concern then was, heroin was just out of control in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And there was lots of violence. They used to say, never leave the house without at least a $5 bill in your pocket. In case somebody robs you, you at least got a $5 to give them. No, I was told that when I lived in New York. And there were times I was really frightened in some of the neighborhoods. And I had a colleague who was been in the community a lot more than me, and he carried a gun. And I remember once being out with him and him when I was with him, I always remember feeling a little different. Well, I didn't have a gun, and in some ways I wasn't, but the thought that he had one and knew how to use it, I think made me feel a little better. So I've had some experiences like that, and heard from other people who felt like a gun gives them a kind of security, particularly in some of these, our big cities where violence is so prevalent.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. Like I had an experience in Washington, D.C., down near M Street, where I was going to this was only a few years ago. I was going to this club, and it was a popular club at the time. And there was like, how sometimes the clubs have a crowd around them because the bouncers are keeping people from coming just rolling in. And there was a kind of a crowd, and the wait was taking longer than people liked, and people started getting a little rowdy. You could just tell the energy shifted. And then some guy came out on a balcony on a building that I think it was not the club, but it was next to the club. He wasn't a police officer, but he clearly had a gun. And it was like the crowd became calmer. Like I felt significantly safer just because of this guy was there, and people like that bad energy seemed to dissipate.
So protect you. Yeah.
Yeah, like and it was real, I don't know if he was elected to the club or what he was, but that was a time in which I often don't think about guns as providing safety, but I certainly felt that at that point. So I know what you're talking about. I can relate to what you're talking about. It's so interesting though that I've had other experiences too. Like here, I live in rural North Carolina, and a couple of years ago, I was in this restaurant, this kind of a large restaurant that I often go to. I was just there this morning. And I noticed this one guy came in, and he, it's open carry here, so he had a gun.
Yeah.
And I noticed that, and okay, fine. And then a little while later, this other dude came in, and like I could tell there was like this weird vibe between them. They didn't speak to each other, but I could tell they were watching each other. Nobody put their hand on their gun, but I was like, what is happening here? Like it just made me nervous to see these dudes who non-verbally conveyed that they were in some level of they were not aligned. And it just made me nervous. I left. I usually have coffee and oatmeal and stay for a while. I was getting out of there. I just didn't even want to be a part of that. So, I've had the experience of guns in the hands of citizens just making me just nervous and scared. And that was the most dramatic time. Other times I've felt when people have guns, I felt a little nervous, but that was a higher level because it was two people and they clearly were not on the same page. So,
yeah.
But so have you ever had that where the presence of a gun made you feel less safe?
Well, generally, my experience has been on the side of it feeling like protection, and as I said, but yeah, it's as you say that. It's funny. I was doing a project. Actually, we may have been working on the same project when I was working on a thing with America Speaks, and we were doing some meetings. I was organizing a meeting. As you mentioned, that open carry. I was organizing some meetings down in New Mexico, and it was right at the time of the Tea Party back about 10 or 12 years ago. And one of their big issues was open carry and showing. And I had never been around that. I've been around people with guns, but the open carry thing made me a little nervous. Guy showed up at some meeting I was facilitating with a pistol on his pocket. And I hadn't thought of that in a while, but that did. But I think it was because I didn't know him, When my uncle had it or something, I felt, okay, that's a protection. But it was a little funny to see a guy at public meetings. So I did have that experience.
Yeah, so I guess, it's really weird how I think we tend to come on different sides of it, but sometimes, it's part of the reality is sometimes we feel better and sometimes we don't, right? So as we just got to think about that as we try to sort it out. And scene. So you should notice, I mean, it might be obvious what I try to do. He says his Theo expresses his opinion. I asked him for experience related to it. He gave me a couple. I gave an experience that leans in his direction, that supports his point of view, even though that's not my overall point of view. Before I invited him to look at it differently. That's the challenge step. And then I closed with the harmonized step by asking for an opinion that is against his general opinion, but leads to mine. And he was willing to do that partially because I told him to as a role player, but part in the realistic situation, because I've empathized with him, he's more inclined to try to do that. So, so any commentary, observations before we move forward? I hope that demonstration was clear about the method. Okay. So, what I would like to do is to have Rafi. Do you feel ready to try this method?
I think I would naturally be using an approach such as that. Yeah.
Okay. That's fine. That's fine. So, let me set this up. We did a little advanced planning on this. So, Ricky, Rafi's going to use the effort with Theo. Right. So in the scenario is that after you're going to ask what's on his mind, Rafi, and Theo's going to tell you about he has an upcoming visit to a hospital, and the hospital strongly recommends that people wear masks when they enter the hospital, and that bugs him. He's tends to be pretty solidly anti-mask mandate, and so what I'm asking you to do is to use the reach method. We're not going to necessarily see you relaxing, but to ask him about his experiences. Try to find some point of through a story. You can ask him about his opinion, but you want to make sure you get to a story before not just his opinion. try to tell some story that shows some alignment with it before you tell a story that goes in a different direction. And then if you feel comfortable, you try to harmonize to try to invite a perspective that many things can be opposing things can both be true sometimes. So why don't y'all try that? And then at the end, we can all comment about how that went, and we might do it again if necessary. But let's try it at least once for our consumption.
Okay, so Theo, I understand you're heading to the hospital, and I know you're not thrilled about masking, but the hospital pretty much demands it, strongly recommends it, perhaps demands it. I would think you should wear a mask, but tell me why you wouldn't. I mean, why? What is your consideration, despite the recommendation of the authorities there? Despite that recommendation,
Yeah.
Why might you not?
Yeah, Rafi, hi. Well, I think a lot of it's just based on my experience during the recent pandemic. It just seemed to me like there were all
Oh,
kinds
so you're
of
talking about
mandates.
now rather than, so I'm placing my mind in the pandemic.
Right, but I mean, but
now it's fine. Now it's fine. Supposing it was a.
No, I mean, they're talking about COVID's back. There was an article in the paper
Oh, yeah,
yesterday about
absolutely.
there's a
That's true.
COVID, and
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
reading that, and it made me think about this. No, I mean, I just felt like that during the COVID, there were so many mandates that were unnecessary mandates. So I tend to kind of be kind of critical and skeptical. I would say that about whether they're needed or not. Seems to me like a masks are fine if you want to wear one. Maybe there's some really crowded situations. I don't know where I remember being on the metro and thinking, well, maybe I'm here, I need a mask. But most of the time, my experience has been that these mandates overdone, and the government's overreacting or organizations are overreacting.
Okay, so unfortunately, for this exercise, you might be closer to my opinion than is ideal. So optimally, we would have talked about an absolute mandate during COVID and before larger question marks emerged. But let me take it from there, because you say you're a skeptic, and I love being skeptical. And moreover, I can say, just in my academic circles, I know how often experts are wrong. And so somebody voices an expert opinion, that doesn't mean it's correct.
Yeah.
And it's shocking, like 60% or more of published medical, peer-reviewed medical articles turn out to be faulty in part or in the whole, in entirety, in the conclusions. And we know that because a subsequent study comes out, or we know that because you have different people voice as experts that disagree with each other. So, yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. So I personally agree with you on the skeptical attitude. I am deeply against being told what to do, and I tend to have a dim view of authority. It's.
I think that's kind of where I'm coming from. I just felt that, particularly, there were certain things, like I remember when I started back, when gatherings started happening, and I went to church, and then you had to wear a mask, even when you're trying to sing, which really annoyed me.
Ridiculous things.
Or you ever tried to sing with a mask? I mean, it's sort of or just other times at the baseball games, you had to wear a mask, and so I think I got really cynical and skeptical because of that kind of thing.
We easily get into absurdity. So let me try to explain why I might, despite completely agreeing with you on absurdities and possible mistaken expertise, I think that if the authorities are suggesting in such strong terms that they recommend this, why I might say go along with it, despite all my skepticism. And as I say, I take a dim view of authority. I think that people are well-meaning. That's important to realize. I don't think that people are just trying to control us with these things. But I think they could be completely wrong. And often after the fact, one realizes that measure was not necessary. Statistics don't bear it out. A few years ago, before COVID, I had an accident. My garage door power was not working. And so I'd been manually raising the garage door and lowering it for a few weeks. And I'd done it many times. But this one time, when I lowered that garage door, you know that the slats of the garage door, they kind of go apart at the top as they roll over, and then they come together as the door is coming down. I got my finger caught in it as it came down. Now, I'm a violinist, and my fingers are extremely important to me. And I panicked. And what I should have done was, with the other hand, push the door back up and release it. But instead, I pulled my finger out and ripped the flesh significantly on my fingertip. This was a Sunday. I drove to various urgent care centers. Many of them were closed. We found one that was open, and they said, no, but we can't treat you. You have to go to the emergency room at Yale New Haven Hospital. And I got to Yale New Haven Hospital, and they attended to me and took 11 stitches. And thankfully, I can still play the violin. And one can almost not notice where that very significant ripped flesh was. Fortunately, the bone was not broken. Now, why do I bring this up? A lot of the reasoning in the public health policy mandates was in place because, at least in some parts of the country, not necessarily everywhere, but in some parts of the country, healthcare systems were overwhelmed. If I had gotten during COVID to the hospital and there were acute respiratory cases there, and I couldn't get my finger treated, I might not be able to play the violin.
Mm-hmm.
And this would be a routine treatment to fix. But if the health system is overwhelmed, then then people in the public that have nothing to do with masking and the infection can be impacted in unanticipated ways. Now think about it. If I move around unmasked and I transmit, maybe I was infected, but I have a mild case and I transmit, and somewhere that creates a cluster, and at least in some phase you get this exponential growth of these cases, and the health system is overwhelmed. Then at least locally there's a real problem for standard care to give to the public. Now, that produces stupidities, no question, because there are parts of the country where public health policy is articulated in a one-size-fits-all fashion. And often that is maddeningly stupid. There are places where it doesn't apply. There are places where it's exaggerated. So why might I say not only in the crowded case, I might go along with that? Well, that's where we might have another conversation. Despite being one of the most arrogant people I know myself, I have enough humility to think that I just could be wrong. But even if I'm not wrong, there's a certain value. I value society, and I think we would all suffer if some order in society weren't preserved. And sometimes that means going along with what is being demanded by the powers that be, even if you disagree with it. So from that perspective, my personal choice, and you may make a different choice, my personal choice is at least not to be in your face about diverging from what is being recommended, because that undermines the cohesiveness of society. What do you think about that?
No, that's interesting. The idea of consideration for others, I guess you're saying, is being requested.
It's not only my well-being.
I could see some of that. I just and I mean, as I said, I'm not necessarily 100% never would wear a mask. It's just that I'm very skeptical. I'm not sure why it needs to happen in a hospital lobby, or I'm just there visiting one person, but yeah, I think we may have some agreement that there might be some situations where it would be important to do it. But I think they're really rare situations, and they're generally, not so.
Personally, what I would love to push for was more nuanced public health policy, and more education, because I personally don't think they're explaining that reasoning well enough. They're just being a dictum, just an edict.
Yeah.
You got to do this, and that just gets us. I don't like being told what to do. That just gets me upset, and
Yeah, we have a similar reaction on that.
yeah,
Resistance to
absolutely.
being told what
And
to do,
also, I would love some more humility about the articulation of opinions that we know we're not prepared to back up statistically. Sometimes we have to act. Public policy needs to be formulated even when we don't know. And if we could upfront say, we don't know what the best course is, this is what we recommend right now, please follow it. Whereas if they just say, we know everything, and you've got to do what we're telling you, then that gets my anger up.
All right, so let me call time on that. Thank y'all so much for the role play. So, any observation? I want to ask Preeti and Zoran and Felicia, any observations that you have about that exchange?
I definitely have something to say. Ralph, no offense about this, but I felt it was a little bit over drawn out about your point of view. It could have been like briefer, and just because when it's, first of all, the human ear, can't listen for more than 7 minutes. Like really, you're not really listening after some time. You're just,
Yeah, I tend to be long-winded, that's for sure.
yeah, you're kind of just getting the gist after some time, not listening to people's words. But I think that it could have been shorter. That would have made it like,
More powerful.
yeah, I think so. More impactful. Yeah, that's part of it.
Okay.
And thank you for that. Thank you, Preeti. Felicia or Zoran?
Still adjusting it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with
Pretty.
Pretty. And also, I'd also like to mention that I'm kind of distracted by a lot of things, so I was in and out of the convo, so I don't have really good feedback to give. But yeah, like from what I heard, I'm gathering that like bringing it down, being a little short. I have the same issue of just drawing stuff out, and I feel like the more information I give, the more it's going to help the listener understand, but it's actually doing the opposite. And I fall into that kind of thing where it's like, yeah, where I think the more I say, the more understanding it is, but it's just like you see the eyes wandering, you see like, and then I'm like, oh, I'm saying such useful things. Like, what's but,
Don't they see
yeah.
how smart I am?
Yeah, don't they see how like logical I am? Yeah, like,
Right.
so.
That is
Okay.
definitely a fault.
I got you. So here's what I would say. What I would say is, I would agree with some of that, but I would also say that you, Rafi, you talked about experts being wrong, and that happening repeatedly. And what I would do is to make that comment, but I mean, I know it might not come to your mind, but if you had like one specific example of when they were wrong, that's going to be more powerful. Like you could make the observation, but other people will feel it more if you like. I mean, you probably have a number of examples because you're a pretty deeper, but like one example to drill down on that, and saying that one example really amplifies it. It strengthens the observation. So I would so again that's more bringing to bear the agreed part. You're actually wrong. Let me tell you about the time they were wrong, right? So and then you drill down on that. I think it makes more of a connection.
Yep.
Now I would also say I love your general point about experts need to be more humble, etc. But what would be also helpful here is if there was a time in which experts said something and then were skeptical, and then they were right.
And they were right. Yes,
right? Because what you're trying to do, you made a good sort of logical case for Theo being humble. But if you brought to bear a time in which you were skeptical, and it turns out experts were right? That you can see how that's going to move him potentially more powerfully to
Good
think
point.
you made
I
it
was
easy.
sort of implying it by saying I'm also humble enough to realize I could have missed something and I could be wrong. But having an actual concrete example where I was thinking against the experts and they turned out to be right, that could be
Yep.
stronger.
Yep. Yeah. So
I think one of the things that you were emphasizing earlier, if I could add a comment, David, is you want to fairly early on get the person you're talking to get their views out as soon as you can. And maybe a little more probing of my views early
Yeah.
on, and then you sharing yours more after that. But the more you
That's
hear
right.
mine early on,
Right.
and I've gotten to talk, I've relaxed a little, I feel I've gotten my airtime, then I think I'm more able to hear you when you do it.
Yeah.
So that would be
I
the
shouldn't
one
have such a
suggestion.
big chunk of monopolizing the
Yeah,
conversation.
but early on, particularly, it maybe not even so much how much, but it's the timing, early on to get the other person to get their views out.
And I would say one more, I think that's really true. Thanks for saying that, Theo. I'll say one more thing about that, which is, and I did a little bit of this, but you did more than I did, and I'm not sure either of us should have done it. When you know there's disagreement, sometimes it's not necessarily useful to highlight, I know we disagree. Like you can inquire about their opinion, you can ask for their experience without verbally reminding each of you that we look at it differently. Like, I want to hear more about your opinion. You don't have to say, we look at it differently, I want to hear about your opinion, because they probably know that you do that. And because of the way we hold difference of opinion in our hearts, it's often less than useful to raise that.
David, let me explain my reasoning in that regard. It seems to me that to the extent that the conversation is perceived as, at least on my side, counting on being able to persuade the other side, that can get a defense up. And when I say I'm perfectly prepared not to succeed in persuading you, but I want you to acquaint you with my side of it, that might reduce that defensiveness. And so that was my reasoning.
These are all judgment calls. These are all judgment calls.
Yeah.
Nothing is universally true. So thank you for that. So we're at 2:06, and I guess I want to just
David Preety's got a hand up. I don't know.
Preety. I was going to ask for comments and questions. So sure.
One very specific point there that Raphael could have said is that hospitals are a space for vulnerable and fragile people also. And that's maybe in other spaces it's perfectly fine not to mask up, but specifically there, because the highest rate of, people who come into the hospital die more than if they had the same sickness at home, they would survive. But they
get diseases in the hospital.
die.
Mm-hmm.
I worked in Mount Sinai Hospital, so I kind of know that statistic, but that's an important thing, I would say. Just giving them the facts about why that would be important.
In this
Sure.
particular issue, yeah.
Sure. So, okay. So, Ricky, you can make it full view. No need to highlight anybody. We're thank you so much. So, Felicia, Zoran, I want to, there's you have somebody who thinks about communication a lot and the subtleties. Obviously, I know this method. I just want to give an open time for commentary or questions about the whole domain of how we approach differences in a way that is more likely to produce connection and more likely to even produce persuasion.
Thank you. This has been very interesting. I won't really be able to pull out specific thoughts yet. I don't think, however many minutes we have left. But it was very good to watch these two demos. And actually, upon hearing them, I kind of agree with some of the comments. But in particular, Raphael's last comment, you're doing this with the intention that you would like someone to understand and maybe switch them over to your opinion. And I kind of like the transparency, because that kind of something I've always felt a little uncomfortable about the occasional descriptions of this approach that I've occasionally heard. And for me, that would have made me feel more comfortable. I just wanted to say that.
Sure,
Yeah.
I got you. No, it's all a judgment call. And like I said before, the good news, and it's really good news in the divisive society, is that the same methods that you would take to create more connection are the ones you do to create more persuasion, right? Mm-hmm. And a trick, and again, we can talk about this in other sessions, one trick of being more persuasive is that there's a weird kind of paradox. Like if you want it too much, you're less likely to get it. So one, it's almost like a spiritual thing. It's almost like you have to approach it with just the desire to be connected, and you might get the benefit of persuasion. But if you're too focused on the persuasion, they will sense that, and there's something called reactance, and they don't want to change because you ain't the boss of me, right? So there's a weird kind of thing to manage.
Absolutely. Be careful not to try to make a land grab.
Trying to grab land in their head.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like a gut feeling too, right? I get those every now and then when like it makes like I hear the speaker kind of be like trying to appease me, but it's like overtly almost like it's a little bit like I'm getting that's a little mechanical. That's a
They're
little
trying to run a program on you. People don't like
they're trying to run a
program on them.
Exactly. And then I'm trying to figure out what the needs they're trying to meet with this program. But like one of the thing is when I feel stuck, like Eric, the Zoom host, he's a wonderful resource to me because when I get really lost in the weeds, as they say, like I get really just lost, I'll reach out to Eric, and Eric's amazing at empathizing. And then I'll really connect to my needs and kind of find my way out of the weeds, and then I'll re-engage in the conversation. So for me, it's really important to have like a support system on the side, and then go back into it. But going back into the conversation with it's like the Marshall Rosenberg world really helps me because I'll usually empathize with the person before I start even considering getting empathy of my own of any sort, because I just find that people do not have the capacity to empathize with me unless they're literally asking for, and even then I'm like, are you sure you asking me or you want like, so I guess for me, like my strategies are usually to just even give a little bit, just like the tiniest amount if I'm really like unresourced. I try to really push myself to listen a little bit if I want empathy. And
disdain
to be
is
heard, to
contagious,
understood.
and so is empathy. That's the, and part of what we can do is to try to be as empathetic as possible. And even if we're a little depleted, try to push ourselves to being a little empathetic. And that has that increases the chance that they will find that. That's true.
Yeah. Like for example, a hospital worker or something, like a nurse, I'll probably, and it has to be genuine, because I could do it out of like a manipulative kind of way. Like it could sound mechanical. I could be like, yeah, it's really hard to be a nurse. But for me, and that's not genuine. So like I have to connect to myself, and I really feel like if I'm genuinely interested in her experience or his experience being in a hospital worker, then I know I'm okay, I have a little bit of resources. But if I have zero and it's all about me, then I have to go to Eric. Like, I have to go to
your empathy battery. I guess.
Yeah, like if I have zero empathy, it's almost, then I'm just like, yeah, there's no point of even trying because I know this isn't going to work. Even if my words are perfect, like the people pick up, there's a gut feeling that people pick up, and that's where that like manipulation is like, oh, they're trying to gain something from this. They're not really asking how I'm doing.
Is there bullshit meter that catches it?
Yeah. And I've done it, like even in emails. Like even emails, you can say all the right perfect stuff and it gets caught. Like you're like, so now I'm just at the point where I'm like, humans are just so good at picking up the realness. So yeah.
Well, this has been great, y'all. We're at 2:15. That was our goal time of so is there anything more anybody wants to say, including Rafi, Theo, or sure?
Yeah, I'd like to touch on Felicia's use of the word transparency. If we're just thinking of persuasion or not persuasion, I'd rather leave persuasion aside for the moment. We definitely know that this technique and any reasonable technique is intended minimally to provide some feeling of connection and empathy, and you come out of this conversation with a better feeling than you went into it. But it's possible to shoot for more, and that doesn't necessarily mean persuasion. It means some productive operative direction. And for that, transparency is helpful. So if you only wanted the good feeling, it probably is best to slur over the disagreements and just focus on the agreements and
That's interesting.
sort of paint with a broad brush. But if you actually want to make progress in any useful direction, it's great to be able to undercut the generalizing. I completely agree with you, or I completely disagree with you, and say, we agree on all this. We have work to do here, and what might we do? The objective is not that I have to persuade you, but we have to. It would be good to come out of this with some productive direction. For that transparency about the residue, we probably agree on a whole lot. I think I'm shocked to find how often I agree on so much with a person I'm disagreeing with. I actually agree with a whole lot about the feelings and the morality and then whatever the issues are. But there is some residue that we have to focus on, realizing we have this whole bank of stuff we do agree on, and now isolate where we disagree and what can we do about that. We can continue to disagree. Is there something practical we can do moving forward? It's sort of a different orientation to what I want the outcome of the conversation to be.
No, I hear you on that. I mean, in part of some of my materials, I have a kind of a generalized dialogue model that this is kind of based on. And the question in phase 4 is, what, if anything, might we do together?
Yes.
So I
Yes.
hear you on that.
Yes.
I hear you on that.
Yeah.
Do you have any final comments? Okay.
Asking whom? Asking
No.
Theo?
So I'll ask Theo that. Yeah. So listen, y'all, I want to really appreciate, thank y'all for coming to this. I want to appreciate Ricky/Eric for being the tech host of Life, Light, and Curious. And we will let you know when the next one is. It'll probably be in a couple of weeks. But our intention is to try to provide a forum where we can explore better ways of talking so we can create less division, more collaboration, maybe more collective problem solving. And I'm really grateful for y'all joining today, and you'll hear from us going forward.
Thank you, David. And nice meeting everyone.
Thank y'all
Thank
so
you.
much.
Bye, everyone.